Hello, welcome to East Asia Institute's. I'm your host, Yul Sohn, president of EAI, um, and also I'm a professor at Yonsei University. This event is the fourth of Democratic Cooperation online seminar series that EAI has planned this year. Today, we would like to discuss Myanmar's democratic transition stories by focusing on upcoming election in November. Today, we feature two excellent panelists. Mr. Matthew, chairperson at Yangon School of Political Science, as one of our partner members of the Myanmar Democracy Research Network, Matthew will speak on behalf of civil society in Myanmar. Another panelist is Mr. Derek Mitchell, president of National Democratic Institute. And he served as U.S. Department of State's first special representative and policy coordinator for Myanmar. I'm sure that his special ties with Myanmar will enrich today's discussion. Both will discuss the future of Myanmar's democracy, together with upcoming election and the current state of Myanmar's democratization. For your information to the public, there will be a Q&A session open to the public at the end of the seminar. So you are welcome to participate throughout the online seminar by raising questions anytime during the seminar using the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom. And the questions will be collected and addressed at the end of the seminar by the moderator. And don't forget including your name and affiliation when raising questions. At this time, I'm honored and pleased to introduce our moderator today, Dr. Yunhan Chu, who is a professor of political science at the National Taiwan University. Professor Chu is also a distinguished research fellow of the Institute of Political Science at Academia Sinica and serves as president of Chiang Ching-kuo Foundation for International Scholarly Exchange. And last but not least, Professor Chu has been a long-standing relationship with EAI in various capacities. So thank you very much for coming today. So now it's over to you.
Good morning, everyone, and good evening for Ambassador Derek Mitchell. I'm so delighted, to serve as a moderator of this very important webinar. Before we get started, I do want to add another important note here that I think we are very fortunate to have truly two outstanding speakers. I couldn't think, more better qualified speaker on this topic. So I do want to acknowledge that Ambassador Mitchell, in his capacity initially as a special envoy for political coordination, he has been a key interlocutor for the political opening of Burma or Myanmar. I think his communication skill, his negotiation skill, and also I think his vision for smooth, non-violent transition from the military rule to at least a semi-democratic new regime, I think has been instrumental. So and also he has served a very long and distinct career, both in government and at think tank like the CSIS, one of the leading think tank in Washington, and also before his State Department appointment, he at one point he served as the principal deputy assistant secretary of defense in charge of the Asia Pacific security affairs. So we are very lucky to have you here, Ambassador Mitchell. Yeah, And also I want to also acknowledge that, our second speaker, Myat, he has been a leading popular intellectual, in Myanmar, widely recognized. He was formerly a prisoner of conscience during the military repression, and then he was released, from the prison and rejoined the academic world, and also received some advanced training in political science overseas. And later on, he became one of the founding member of Yangon School of Political Science. And Yangon School is an independent think tank, but also a very important civic organization dedicated to democracy promotion and civic education. And in my capacity as the director of Asian Barometer Survey, which is a regional initiative to do regular survey across Asia, focusing on citizen politics, democracy, quality of governance and development. We have been collaborating with Myat and his colleague at Yangon School. We jointly conducted the first countrywide survey that's part of the Asian Barometer Wave 4 in 2015. And last year, we are fortunate, that we are able to also, we were able to implement another wave of Asian Barometer survey, collecting very important popular opinion data, for the consumption of the civil society and the political science community at large. So without further ado, I would like to start the first round of discussion by focusing on the forthcoming election itself. We know that the forthcoming election will be the second free general election during this important stage of the democratic transition. I would like to ask our two speakers basically to compare this election with the election in 2015, the founding election. Okay, obviously there will be a lot of continuity, but also the meaning and significance and potential impact has also I believe there has been changed somewhat due to the unfolding of the political process. And a lot of observers believe that the current leader, the incumbent Aung San Suu Kyi and her party will be on their way to their second victory. But to what extent her party can forge the same kind of grand coalition like last time, especially whether they can generate the same kind of support on the fringe, those ethnic minority dominated region, that remain to be seen. And specifically, we want to focus on what's at stake as far as the democratic future of Myanmar is concerned. So I will invite Ambassador Mitchell to speak first. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Chi and Han. It's good to see you, my good friend, my old friend. We've known each other a long time, so I'm very grateful for this opportunity. Grateful to the East Asia Institute and Yul Sohn for the invitation as well, and to my good friend Myat, who I miss all my good friends back in Myanmar from years ago, and I have nothing but admiration for his life's dedication to his country and the sacrifices he has made. And what you said, Professor Chu, about what I did, whatever my service was as U.S. ambassador, pales in comparison to what the people of Myanmar and people of Myat, the kind of sacrifices and struggle and commitment that they put in over decades. And I remain in awe, and I remain humbled by being on the same panel with him. So it's a little strange for me to be going first, I guess, and talking about his country, but let me give it a shot. You ask about what's different or what's at stake in this election. You know, it doesn't seem like 5 years ago since the previous election. It seems like yesterday to me. There was so much at stake in that election. There was so much global attention in that election. That was the culmination, frankly, of all the work that I had sought to do as first the envoy and then the ambassador, and again, culmination of years of struggle and sacrifice by people inside Myanmar. But I always knew, even from the start, when we saw the liberalization, the opening up, the release of political prisoners, the allowance of the NLD to be part of the parliament, to be accepted as a registered political party, to allow for more free media, to have civil society come out. I mean, people forget what Myanmar was like not long ago, 10 years ago. This was as closed societies can be, and very few people would have expected any change, any real reform. And we saw that gradually, step by step, during the time where I was engaged. And it was an extremely hopeful period. You know, we look back and it seems inevitable. It wasn't inevitable. It was the choices that certain people made in the leadership. And it was remarkable. We weren't sure how far this was going to go and how sincere it was. Over time, we felt more confident about it. But the ultimate test I always felt, and again, I started as envoy in 2011, became ambassador in 2012. I left in 2016, right after the election. But my test always was going to be, from day one, the test of this change and reform was going to be the election. That was in 2015. That was going to be the test of, will this ruling regime, this quasi-military government, which had just sort of taken off their uniforms and assumed the role of a political party, will they truly put power and everything that goes around that in the balance? Understanding, of course, that the Constitution remained the same, that the fundamentals of the society, the structure of the country was not going to change, that the military was going to control 25% of the parliament. The military was going to control much of the economics. The military was going to control all the security services. But still, there was going to be something at stake in this election in 2015. A lot was riding on what we would say free and fair, or a credible election, a transparent election. And it was the culmination of all that period. And it was a moment of euphoria. I mean, it was remarkable on election day. I was in Shan State in the morning, and I was in Mandalay in the evening, and they were showing the ballot counting on screens all over the big cities. And you were seeing the results in real time. It was a remarkable display after a period where there was no trust in the system. And you mentioned this one being the second election. In some ways, it's the fourth major election since the reversion to military junta in 1962. There was the election in 1990 that the military junta decided they didn't want to accept. They didn't like the way it came out. There was 2010, where the NLD decided they didn't like the way that was going, and it wasn't going to be a truly free and fair election. They boycotted. So 2015 was a real test. And the euphoria, the moment of transparency and the euphoria, and the results being such an overwhelming and clear result, regardless of the result, as an American ambassador, I didn't take a position on the result, but the fact that the result was so clear, the process was transparent, there were problems with it, it wasn't fully fair, but that there was at least credible. And then ultimately the results were respected. That next round, it was respected in a transition of government in March, April of 2016 was remarkable. And there was a moment of great hope and possibility, even understanding just how much was still in the control of the military, and nothing had really changed structurally there. So what's at stake in this election is a continuation of some of that momentum. I think we can talk later about what has happened between now and then in terms of democratic progress and whether it matched the expectations that people had. But certainly just taking one election and the next election, you would want to see this election take another step forward. You saw steps forward in the last election. There were, for instance, independent election monitors allowed. Civil society actors were able to do voter education, were able to monitor the election freely. You were able to There was a good deal of disenfranchisement in the last election. Disenfranchisement certainly of the Rohingya, but also of some in ethnic areas where there was fighting going on. And there's questions of, will that then get rectified? Will there be peace? Will people be able to vote? How many people will be able, if you have some disenfranchisement, does it really threaten the integrity of the election? And of course, in this election, you have COVID. I mean, the elephant in the room, which we'll have to talk about in some depth, of just how much of a credible election you can have in these conditions where you're not able to necessarily campaign as freely as you otherwise would. How can you hold elections? And now it's spiking in Myanmar, which is very sad. They did a remarkable job of trying to tamp down the COVID challenge, but that's now spiking. So really what's at stake, and I'll just finish up here, is I never know how much time I have. I think you told us to talk 5 to 7 minutes or so I decided to take up that time. But ultimately, the defining challenges of Myanmar are also the defining challenges of this election. You have to continue to build the trust in the society. The foundational problem of the country is that unity amidst its diversity, and the fact that people just don't trust across ethnic lines, across religious lines. Oftentimes, I mean, there's some, but there's very little social trust. And elections are critical moments. They're critical. They're not democracy in its entirety, but they're critical tests of every muscle, democratic muscle a country has. It tests everyone, political parties, civil society, the government, everything. So the challenge will be, will it be credible enough to build more trust in the system and advance the democratic progress of the country or not? So I'll leave it there. There's a lot to unpack and all that, but just as by way of introduction.
Okay, wonderful. Now I would like to invite Matthew to offer his observation. Yeah, Matthew, please. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm really honored to be on the same boat as these distinguished people, especially with former Ambassador Derek Mitchell and his very kind introduction. And also he is very passionate on Myanmar. He is always passionate on Myanmar. So I'm really glad to be on the same boat. So I think Myanmar is in the right direction, because in 2015 elections, we are really worried about the smooth transition. So at the time, nobody was very certain that there will be a smooth transition, and I think we are very lucky to have such kind of smooth transition. And now after 5 years, it is the election again, and now the things are changing in some respects, because there are some new parties like the People Party and the People Pioneer Party, and also especially in the ethnic minority areas, there are the merger of the ethnic political parties, because many of them have a lot of frustrations over the 5 years period, because I think that they are not satisfied with the NLD performance, especially on the ethnic affairs, and so they are now very powerful in the country. But if you look at the data, you will see that it is, now many people think about the coalition government will be formed after the 2020 elections or something like that. But if you look at the data, I think it will be still difficult, because NLD is still very popular, and the most of the swing votes that can happen in the country in the 2020 elections will be especially in 3 areas like Kachin State and Kayah State and also Mon State, because the Shan and Rakhine has already successful in their 2015 elections, and I think there will not be much swing votes in these 2 states. But in Kachin and Kayah and Mon State, because of the Maja Party are very powerful and very strong now, so I think there will be some swing votes in these areas. But if you look at the the number of the seats in the Union Parliament, because this is the most important place to decide who will be the president of the country. So if you look at these three places, you will see that altogether they have 71 seats, in all the three areas. And now NLD gained like 58% of the Union Parliament. So if for the 9% to require for the other party combined to form to bargain for the presidency or something like that, they will need like around 58 seats. So you will see that to swing 58 seats to from the NLD is really difficult. And because of the electoral system, it is SMTP. So in the Burma proper area, you will see that the PPP will be popular now. But because of the SMTP system, I think it is really difficult for them because of the Aung San Suu Kyi's popularity, because she is still very popular. She might not be popular in the Western countries and Western democracy, but it is reality that she is still very popular in the country. And in the very recent, the red campaigns, you will see that there are a lot of people, especially in the Burma proper area. Her popularity is I think decreasing in the ethnic minority areas. It is true, but in the Burma proper area, I think she is still very popular. But the real problem is like the first one is the COVID. So I'm not sure how the UEC will conduct the election. So this is the main challenge. And another thing is about the violences. In our last research topic in the Asia Democracy Research Network, we discovered that we did it on the disinformation in Myanmar, and we found two main concerns. One is the religious-based communal violence, and another is the election influencing. And the frequency of the disinformation on the election influencing is much more than the frequency for the communal violence. And the more interesting thing is the cross-cutting of these two areas. The impact of the communal violence on the election influencing. We saw that in the Meiktila area. In 2013, there was a communal violence, and it killed over 40 people in Meiktila township. And after the incident, once a stronghold for the NLD, always stronghold for the NLD, all related seats, like 4 seats for the Meiktila region, were now controlled by the USDP. So we predicted it, and we prepared for these kind of violences. And in very recently, you will see that there were some kind of violences in the Meiktila region again. So another challenge, now people are not very aware of these upcoming situations, but I think the real challenge lies in we will see more violence in some of the areas in the country. So for now, I think it is enough for that.
Okay, thank you, Myat Chu, for your very illuminating analysis. Now, I want to, as a follow-up question to both of you, Derek and Myat Chu, some observers they worry that this election won't be as free as last one. Okay, with their observation is 3-4. Number one, COVID-19. Derek has already mentioned this biggest elephant in the room. So not only we have all kind of restriction on mobility, has been in place, but also that that obviously will constrain how what kind of campaign activity can be conducted otherwise in a normal circumstances. And secondly, last election get the world attention, right? You have so many international observers, came to Burma, and to make sure that all party, observe, the democratic procedure and rule. But this obviously, this election won't grab as many attention, nor as many international observer group. That's for sure. And thirdly is that obviously all kind of rules and regulation seem to in favor the major party, right? To mention the single non-transferable vote, which is first past the post, so it generate usually the winner take all, right, effect, and also due to the the populace, I would say excitement or enthusiastic aspiration is not as intensive as last time. So again, the turnout might be lower, not to mention the dampening effect of COVID-19. Again, so for the established party, they have the regional office, they can do door-to-door canvassing, more easily than minor party. So all this, do you think that's a fair, narrative, or you have more confidence in, the basic free and fair nature of this forthcoming election? Yeah, would either one of you or both of you willing to comment? Yeah, Mr. Yu first, yeah, and then I will invite Derek, to join us later, yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot of challenges, and you will see that very recently they first rejected the pace for the election observations or something like that. So this is quite even for the ordinary people, it is quite very questionable for the UEC's commitment to the free and fair elections or something like that. So we have to be honest on that, and also because of the COVID-19, I think this is also a major challenge, and the current the NLD party has a lot of advantages over that because they hold the office and they hold everything. And I think they have some advantages, and also it is COVID makes it difficult for the election observers also. So how will they observe under these situations? And so I think it would have a negative effect on the free and fairness of the elections. And also another is about the voter turnout. So the voter turnout, and under these conditions, how with the social distancing and something like that, how many people will go out for the to the polling station? So many people are really worried about the situations because Yangon, especially Yangon, is now seems like out of control for the COVID-19, and so I think there are a lot of challenges, and I'm not sure if you heard it or not, but very recently, like 3 or 4 days ago, one of the Democratic Party called the Democratic Party for a New Society, their campaign speech to broadcast on the national radio was censored by the UEC, and so they were very upset and they withdraw it, and also they make a press conference. So I think it is UEC is in that position to censor this kind of campaign speech by one of the Democratic parties or something like that. So I'm a bit worried about the free and fairness of the situations, especially because of some of the activities of the UEC. Yeah.
And just to add to that, I mean, obviously that's all exactly right. And we've heard similar things even back here. In fact, NDI, with whom I'm president of, works with PACE, and we were very concerned when we had learned the UEC was not going to accredit PACE. We'd done such a great job when I was ambassador. And these are the types of signals that give people less confidence in the process. The process has to be credible for people to think the results will be credible and the election is credible. And there was that confidence, even though it was not fair 5 years ago for various reasons. There was a certain degree of confidence that the result reflected popular will and it was overall a decent process. Now you hear things about UEC, you hear that, for instance, that criticism is considered fake, or hate speech, or sort of off limits, and defamation is not allowed. And you have to be able to distinguish between legitimate electioneering and defamation, so these are lines that need to be drawn very, very carefully in order to keep the credibility. The other thing I would add to what Myat Tu said, I mentioned it briefly earlier, is the continuing violence in the country. That in Rakhine State, for instance, you're going to have hundreds of thousands, if not a vast majority of the 1.6 million Rakhine, who may be disenfranchised because they're not able to hold elections there. There are IDPs in both Rakhine and Kachin and maybe Eastern Shan, who also, hundreds of thousands of them who will be disenfranchised and not able to vote. That was the case somewhat, not so much in Rakhine, but certainly in Shan and maybe parts of Kachin back 5 years ago. But that also creates questions about whether the result will reflect true popular will. And then I have to mention again, as I mentioned before, for the international audience, that because it's less of an issue internally, but it does matter to people, that 1 million Rohingya are not allowed to vote. And that happened 5 years ago. People in Myanmar don't consider them citizens, and therefore they shouldn't have been allowed as white card holders, so-called, of sort of residents, but not full citizens. But there's also concern that many of them have been disenfranchised, people that had the right to vote years ago, who were citizens, their cards had been taken from them. So all of that adds up. In Chin State, I didn't mention as well, in the West, there are questions in places there. So all this adds up to some real question marks that, okay, you do move forward, but okay, you have an election. On election day, people vote, those votes are counted, but how truly representative and how much of this is really a step forward from where it was 5 years ago, and therefore how much will the people of the country feel this represents their will? 5 years ago, you had that sense that this represented the popular will, and that created a sense of stability. If people don't feel it represented their will, if they feel that there was really the conditions were slanted, that gives a sense of unease, and it makes it more difficult for what results to be, to govern, frankly. Though I agree with Myat Tu in what he said, where the NLD never vote against never bet against the NLD in an election in Myanmar. They tend to do extraordinarily well, particularly in the Burman areas.
Wonderful. And now, for our timeline, maybe we should move on to the second round of discussion, and let's now focus on the bigger question about the democratic transition. And we all recognize that Myanmar has already made tremendous progress, toward democratic outcome. But on the other hand, there's no question that it's still a long way to go, right, for Myanmar to become widely recognized as a full democracy. And there's so many challenges, especially if you care about not just the procedure, but also the quality of the political system, and whether the system really enjoy a very solid, widespread support among the populace, and whether the population, citizen, they have built up their sense of efficacy, their sense of civic duty, that they can fully exercise their political rights, things like that. So if I, put this question more straightforwardly, has the country's momentum of democratization lost its steam. It might be stuck, somewhere in the middle. Difficult to see whether there will be, the thrust, major thrust, to continue this democratization process. And also, I can think of a lot of other obstacles and barriers that, this country have to overcome on its way to a full democracy. I'm thinking of the issue like state capacity building, rule of law, and protection of the ethnic and religious minority, sustainable and inclusive economic growth, which is also important, the tangible outcome of the performance. And finally, the rising of the level of civil engagement and political participation. For instance, that our survey has indicated that in terms of political culture, Myanmar people is still far more deferential to authority, and they have a much lower sense of efficacy as compared to citizens in other ASEAN countries. So, what's your assessment, about this momentum of democratization, and what are the major challenges ahead? Yeah. So maybe Derek, would you like to speak first? Yeah.
Sure. Look, we have to be patient with Myanmar. I mean, democracy is not going to come in a place that had dug the kind of hole that Myanmar had for 50 years. It's going to take time. That you can have an election, you can have a process, you can even have some institutions or the political parties or a parliament and all the rest that are the trappings of democracy. But ultimately, it takes time. Mindsets change much more slowly than an institution. You can set up an institution or have a process. And that can take generations, to be honest, because we've seen this all over. I was just talking about that this morning I gave testimony on Capitol Hill about democracy in Asia, that you often have the same old people, and they're typically guys. Now we have Aung San Suu Kyi in Myanmar, so we have someone who's not a guy, but typically the same old folks who, and she's a little different than your normal person, political figure. But, even societies just get used to a culture, that they've grown up with, and they may desire something different. They may have a vision of something different, but they may not understand entirely what democracy means. They may not understand what a democratic culture entails. And that's something that is, I think, bred very gradually within a system, within a society, from young people on. It has to be in the education. It has to be in the instincts people have, the expectations, the responsibilities, as well as the rights that come with democracy. Things that, frankly, in the United States, we may have lost over the years because we get too used to, we just got complacent that, well, democracy is in our culture. It's easy, but you have to understand your responsibilities as well as your rights. So, so it's hard. Democracy is very hard. And these questions of where those lines are, what's the difference between defamation and, criticism? What is libel and what is mistake by media players? What is responsible media versus irresponsible libelous media that is legally liable? I happen to think that Myanmar is still on the, working on, they haven't quite made the move to the more democratic mindset, even under the NLD. They haven't, I'll be very honest, I mean, I can say this now in a way I probably couldn't as ambassador, but they're just not making enough progress quick enough to meet the expectations of the people. Not that they're going to create peace or create a democratic system overnight, but to change some of the laws, the old laws that are on the books, to allow for free media, free speech, the communications law, all these other things that need to be addressed, and political prisoners that continue to be arrested. So yes, I think the expectations need to be managed. I think people's expectations have been dashed, that an NLD government did not move as quickly and as decisively and as robustly as they would have expected. And that maybe even Daw Suu hasn't been as robust in her leadership in that way, in driving that new democratic moment of laying down the markers of what a future democratic Myanmar should look like. and laying those foundations in law and in process of the NLD. The UEC, as suggested, is somewhat emblematic of that. It's unfortunate to see some of the decisions that they may be making as represented by Myat too. So yes, you can say it's slowed down, but this is a long game. We have to recognize that, and it doesn't mean that it's off track.
Well, be patient. Yeah, that's your key message. Yeah, lovely. Myat too. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think Myanmar is very patient, maybe too patient. And yeah, as I said before, I think the smooth transition is very important in the first 5-year periods. But I think after 5 years, I think we have to make progress on other areas, especially in the peace process and also in the problem in the Rohingya areas, and also more importantly on the, as Ambassador Derrimache pointed out, the free speech, because the NLD is very popular and the other people's voices are silenced by the tyranny of the majority. So this is very important issue in the country, and sometimes when someone criticizes in the policy matters, there is no defamations or there is no hate speech, but they reported to the Facebook, and many of the posts that criticize just policy of the NLD were taken down on the social media. So this is one of the very important area. And another thing I would like to focus is on the peace process. Because of the NLD's weakened position in civil military relations that is guaranteed by the 2008 constitution, they cannot make many progress in the peace process. And there was a union accord, Part 3, signed by the EAOs and the stakeholders in the previous, the 4th Panelong conference. But if you look into the details, you will see that there are many paradoxes. Because if many of the federal principles were laid out in the Part 3 of the Union Accord, and the implementation plans beyond 2020 elections. But if you look at in details, you will see that to adopt the de jure federal system, you have to amend the constitution. And in the previous effort in 2019, NLD didn't want to change the relevant sections for the federalism alone, and they bundle it up together with the 25% of the military presence in the parliament. So they said that if you have to remove 25% presence in the parliament so that we can change the federal structure. But the military were not be willing to reject the entrenched position in the system. So this is one of the big dilemmas. And another thing is about between the ethnic EAOs and the Myanmar military, because there are a lot of long-term hostility between them, a lot of suspicions among them. So if they have to change the constitution, the military will demand the DDR, disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration first. And for the EAO side, they are suspicious of the military and also the Burma government, and they don't want to lose their bargaining chips. So they want to still control the army. At the same time, they want to change the federal structure. So this is another kind of political impasse that whoever formed the government will have to overcome beyond 2020 elections. And another thing is about there are some paradoxes in the society. In our Asian Barometer survey, you will see that although Myanmar are among the highest in the region, support the democracy, they also support military rule and military involvement in the country. So it is paradoxical. And also at the same time, they support NLD a lot. But for the question on the political efficacy, you will see that 95% of people never contact their representative, and also they answer that only 33% said that they have the ability to take back in the politics or something like that. So as Professor Derek Mitchell said, it takes time to change the mindset, but I think more effort should be put in these areas, because without them, I think these current norms and values are not quite democratic. And also because of these and some problem like the Rohingya issue will be very difficult to solve in the near future. And another less problem will be about after the 2020 elections, because what you will see in the Western region, you will see that ANP won the majority in their local parliament, 22 out of the 34 seats. So it is legitimate to form their local government for them, but NLD appointed their own the Rakhine MP in the region. So it is create the very legitimate ground for the Arakan army to make a successful recruitment in the area. No, you won, and what happened to you? So the party politics did nothing good to the Arakan people. So in politics, from my personal experience, the reason data is very important. The reason of existence or legitimacy of the political organization is very important. If something undermines it, I think another organization that can take advantage of this situation will be very successful. And given the situation, we are seeing that the KSPP and MUP will do better in the 2020 elections, and I foresee that there will be frustrations among these Kachin ethnic parties if they cannot do anything, or if they don't have any political or any power, although they won in the 2020 elections. So it will also encourage for the alternative means, such as the violent conflicts or something like that. So I think it is also the very important challenge after 2020 election.
Can I expand very quickly? Just to extend on what Myat said, which was very important, and just to also add another statement. What he talked about in terms of the expectations and the need for greater progress on democratic change inside Myanmar is very important. Also because, look, the expectations on Aung San Suu Kyi herself as the representative of democracy, of the NLD as being a unique party that has been at the vanguard of the movement. This is the moment, and you know, Dawson used to talk about this as the second independence movement for the country. Well, now, even though the military is still in charge, still has some power, this is the moment to establish the foundation of that new country. This is where you lay down those norms. This is where you start modeling. This is the country we want to be, both in the words that she uses, but also in the way that she governs and what she sends to her representatives and says, this is what it should be. We should have this type of free speech. We should have this type of free media. So this is an enormous opportunity, an enormous moment that in the past 5 years, if I may be very candid, has not been seized at all. And the question is, if the NLD, which is likely to win again, maybe in coalition somehow, they won't have an absolute majority, but they will have a majority in coalition. Question is, does DASU recognize this? Does the NLD recognize this? Will they take advantage of this in the next 5 years? Or will this really critical moment in the evolution of Myanmar as a country, but also Myanmar as a democracy, will this moment be lost? And then who will pick it up if not DASU? If not this unique figure, then who? And the final thing I'll say is I absolutely agree with Myat too. You're not going to have democracy without peace. So you can only play with some of the democratic forms now, but you're really not going to have a true democracy until there's peace, and that has really not made any progress.
Yeah, I think both of you, talk about seize the opportunity, seize the moment. I tend to agree with you. I think, Aung San Suu Kyi, she plays such a pivotal role of of the entire democratic opening process. And I don't think, you know, she will have any kind of successor that can, replicate, the kind of a popular support and all kind of, symbolism, that, she has been, really being able to establish, for her entire political career. And this would be, and most people, agree that, she will be, re-elected probably without much difficulty and serving another 5 years, as a paramount leader of the country. And so the next 5 years, and she's also obviously, maybe she can serve her third term, I don't know, but obviously, this is remain her political prime time, right? Before he, eventually retire. So if you were her advisor, if you can have her years, what would you whisper to her? How she should make the best use of another mandate, popular mandate, obviously she's going to get, from the voter, and also try to use all her capital, political capital, to lay a firmer foundation for the country, in terms of not just the institution building, but also peace process and also building a more tolerant environment, for the religious and ethnic minority. Yeah. Myat, yeah, please.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So because this is the time, because the same popularity as Aung San Suu Kyi holds at the moment cannot be seen in the near future.
Yes.
I'm very confident on that. So I think she should seize the moment and try to make the very good foundations for the democracy or something like that. And because if you see that there are a lot of the Mabata and Wiratu and trying to meddle with the politics like 2-3 years ago, but I always advocated for the suppression of these forces and also trying to stand more on the democratic principles and norms. And when they try to warrant the Wiratu, what happened? So this is the point I always make in the past, because NLD should make whole movement or should take the moral courage to counter these kind of forces. Because after the warranted, there is very little protest or something like that. So it seems that there was no protest at all. So Aung San Suu Kyi has enormous influence and power. She is very charismatic and she has a lot of influence on the people. And before she make a speech, people shouted like, "We stand with Aung San Suu Kyi," even before the speech, even before they know what Aung San Suu Kyi will talk. So this is the popularity we will not see in the near future. So I think she should take the moment and try to build the country stronger and try to lay out the democratic principles for the better future of the country.
What, Derek? Yeah.
No, did you have a comment, Yun Han?
Hmm?
I thought you had a comment.
No. Yeah. Do you have any further comment on?
Yeah. I mean,
what would be your advice, to
yes.
to her?
Well, yeah, I can go on for a while on this. I think, Americans are always good at giving advice. We may not be great at taking it. We should take it more, I think, than give it. But no, I think in building off Myat too, because I think he's absolutely right. And look, there's a legacy issue. If I were to talk to her, I'd say, look, what is the legacy that you want to leave? There's one thing here. There's a difference between leadership and governance in a way. There's a distinction. I think it's reasonable for people, well, it may not be reasonable to expect peace overnight or to change mindsets and have democracy and everything change, have the military change the constitution in 5 years. And, you know, we're not expecting, no one expects that. But it's a reasonable expectation of laying the foundation for an open democratic society. And the question is, are you leading in that direction? And that means, are you doing everything possible to lay those foundations, to represent that in your actions and in everything that you do, and making sure that it is being implemented by your government and those who are out there. And so, you know, reaching out to ethnic, I think they're doing a little bit more, but reaching out to the ethnic groups, the ethnic populations. I'd actually advised this when as I was leaving, I said, you know, go out, it wasn't necessarily she do it, but somebody that she trusts at that time, go out to each of the ethnic capitals, have what we call a town hall and listen to people, hear out people's grievances, understand what they're feeling, and start to build that trust again. Build that sense of that democracy is not just the right to speak, but it's the responsibility to listen. And I think too many folks focus on their rights and they don't focus on the responsibilities. So she can reach out at a very popular level, not a political level, just to listen and to reach out and try to build bridges. Get rid of some of the regressive laws that have been there forever, or recent on communications, on defamation, that cause political prisoners to be rounded up. Just get rid of them and find ways to allow for more free speech. Is very, very important. Just use the voice and use the fact that she has enormous political capital. She has that, as Myat says. People will follow her, and they may not like everything she says sometimes. If she says something that is contrary to their attitudes on religion or whatever else, but use that capital, because what do you want that legacy to be? And if not you, then who? And that responsibility, I think, is deep. Whether she likes it or not, that responsibility has been placed on her. And I don't think it's too high an expectation for those who have fought for, like Myat and others who have fought for the democracy, to see that represented in this government. So that's what I would advise, is she really think not just about governance. How do I pass a budget? But think about, how do I lead to a new vision? How do I establish a new vision? How do I create the foundation after I leave the scene that others can look to, so that what we fought for and died for can be achieved over time, with whether it's good, patience or impatience. And frankly, I'm more on the impatient side. I'm with Myat.
Can I make further comment?
Yeah, please.
Comment, yeah. Because it is quite very timely for that to add to the direct point. Because I also think that, Anari, I found out in my own research, I made some recommendations to advance in the peace process. It is about the de facto federalism. So as Derek said, this is the same kind of the goodwill and the same kind of the political gesture to embrace the ethnic minorities and something like that, and to show them the Aung San Suu Kyi has the very goodwill to share the power among its own people, its own ethnic minorities. So Anadi tried to amend constitution back in 2019, but it was not successful. So because the constitution itself blocked it. So why you are trying to amend the constitution if there are loopholes to grant the de facto federal to the ethnic minority areas without changing or without amending any section of the constitution? So political federal, you just let the local parliament select their own chief minister and appoint them. So you don't have to do it formally, just like back channel and something, the secret committee, and you can easily do it. And also they control the budget at the union parliament, so they can allocate the necessary amount of budget to the people. And also now the administrative department is now under the civilian government, so they can share it to the ethnic minority areas. without changing any section of the 2008 Constitution, and the military will be totally powerless to block it. And also, it de facto also politically speaking, it is also pragmatic because it led the armed organization to continue because no, this is still de facto. It is not de jure, so you don't have to disarm or something like that. So it is kind of the political subtlety. I think she should try to implement after 2020 election. Yeah.
One area of the residual arrangement from the previous regime is the veto power the military still enjoy, right, through this the upper house structure. And also that the current constitution still prevent Aung San Suu Kyi from becoming the former head of state, right? So constitutional issue, do you think is that still a pressing issue, or should be deferred to a later point in time, and in terms of priority, what's your view on this? Yeah, the constitutional reform issue. Yeah, is that should be on the front, for the near-term democratic reform, or due to political, prudence, maybe it's such a sensitive and potentially explosive issues, should be held off, for a while. Yeah. What's your take on this?
Yeah, because they already tried it in 2019. I think it is too soon. They will resume it. So
Okay.
I think they will not do it again in the near future. And another thing is, NLD always trying to abide by the laws.
Yeah.
So they are very different from the student movements or something like that. So there is two traditions going on in the country. The student movements always trying to make social movement, but NLD always trying to abide by the law. So they were trying things within the framework of the existing laws. So this will not be the issue in the near future, I think.
Derek, any comment?
The question arises, I mean, clearly the Constitution needs to be amended to be a truly democratic Constitution, and for the democratic progress to continue in Myanmar. The question, though, is what to change in the Constitution first, or what to prioritize. Yeah. And it seems that the NLD and DASU have sort of a different sense of what should be prioritized and highlighted than, for instance, maybe the ethnics do. But I happen to think that peace is the defining challenge of the country. And if there are ways you can build trust through giving more rights to the ethnic nationalities, then that brings more value than anything else. And that's a question too. And secondly, in order to do it, implied and in what you said, embedded, is you need the military. So I do think that it would be a good thing to change the Constitution, and therefore you need to build trust with the military, which would be a really important thing to do. Yeah. And how you get that done, I don't know. It sounds like that is in a bad situation. I don't know if it gets better if Hang, the commander-in-chief, moves on next year, which I still understand may be a question, even though he's way past the normal retirement year or date. But that's very important to figure that out. I mean, you can't get much done in the country unless there is a trust between the civilians and the military, and you certainly can't change the Constitution.
Wonderful. And I think we have quite a few online audience who has already raised their hand for quite a while. They have been listening to our discussion very patiently. So I already collected a few questions from them. So maybe now we move on to a Q&A session before we formally close this webinar. Question number one, okay, from Gina King, self-identify herself as a graduate student. she asked, I think Myanmar's general election does not merely have impact on Myanmar. It will also have an impact on the foreign policy of traditionally pro-democracy countries like pre-Trump United States. It's an interesting way to phrase it. And she asked, what kind of scenario of US foreign policy can we imagine from the new Burmese parliament in November? So what would be Washington, of these, whether its approach or its agenda, for Myanmar democratic reform.
So the question is, what is the U.S. Foreign policy position on the election?
That's right. Yeah. And also on democracy in general. Yeah. In Myanmar. Yeah.
Well, it depends who you ask in the U.S. government.
Okay.
But it's I think there's a lot of interest in the election. The election is a very important moment, and to continue the progress inside the country. And I think there's a recognition that Myanmar is on a long road, and it's going to take time. We don't have an ambassador right now in country, so our relationship is, in COVID freezes everything. There's not a lot of dynamic interaction, unfortunately. But there is great interest that Myanmar stay on the democratic path, and that the United States maintain a constructive relationship with the people and the government of the country. There's no doubt about that. But look, it's become a one-issue country to many, a nation to many people in the United States and to many people in the U.S. government. It's all about the Rohingya. And you'll be astonished, as I am all the time, by if you get in a conversation here about what's happening there, it's only about Rohingya. And they're talking about the trauma of the Rohingya, and it's understandable. Genocide, it gets attention and it cannot be ignored. It is absolutely understandable. Don't get me wrong. But, we have there's an old saying in the United States, maybe you know it, about, we talk about, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how did you like the play? Which is basically a kind of dark joke where, Abraham Lincoln was killed watching a play, and he's asking her, other than that, how did you like the play? And in the West, it's kind of, well, when you're asked about democracy in Myanmar, a lot of it is, well, other than the genocide, what do you think about what's going on in Myanmar? And it's very difficult to get beyond that one issue. So there's a lot of that in the US government. There's a lot of that in Washington of, is it even worth engaging? I mean, how far should we be engaged in democracy in Myanmar, given that there is this mass atrocity that's occurred over there? Can we even look beyond that? I think there are many in the U.S., some in the U.S. government who think that, but overall, people are looking at it. If it weren't for that, then I think most would be saying, look, we need more impatience, but we also need to be patient with the fact that this is an ongoing challenge. We need to stay engaged. We need to try to, through constructive engagement, help accelerate the process of change and maintain a good relationship that was established during my era. And I think one more thing I should say, there is certainly a recognition of the influence of China inside Myanmar, and that being unhelpful. Not in part, I think people in Washington would talk about the geopolitics, but also they'll say that's not helpful for the democratic changes and liberal society inside Myanmar, the way China does the work that it does. So that also makes Myanmar of interest to many in the United States and of interest in this election.
Yeah, Matthew, I think Derek already touched on a very important issue, that is the ongoing strategic geopolitical confrontation between the United States and China. And what's your take on this? Whether this escalation of tension between the two superpowers, whether it has some harmful effect on Myanmar democratic future? What's your take on this? Yeah.
Yeah, because of the Rohingya issue, I think it is quite understandable for the people in US and the US government focus on these issues, because it is like killing people and mass atrocities and hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the country. I think it should be on the top priority of the foreign policy of the United States. I agree with that. And because of this, but on the other side, from the perspective of the current government and from the people, because of this, they are a bit closer to the Chinese government. I think it is quite going in the wrong direction, because the U.S. has been always helping Myanmar for the democratic transition, and U.S. have offered a lot of help, not only the NLD, but also to us personally for the student movements, and they always help in the democratic transition. And just because of this, I think they shouldn't be closer to to China, because their investment, they don't care very much about the local people, and they don't care much about the human rights, and they don't care about any other things. So I think the Myanmar, but at the same time, China is a very close neighbor. So it is also a problem for the Myanmar. So I think they need to be wise so that they make a balance. Although they have to deal with the China, I think they should also try to engage with the Western democracies if they want to make any progress in the democratic transition, I think.
Yeah, there's another question related to Rohingya crisis raised by another audience. I think, well, anonymous audience. But anyway, she asked, how do Burmese civil society approach the Rohingya crisis? We know, the government itself, get a lot of criticism, for handling the genocide issue and other exclusion issue. But what about the NGO civil society at large? What should be their role in in resolving this issue, and what will be their approach? Or that would be different from the official approach. Yeah.
I think
it
is quite interesting, because after the ASA attacks the police outpost in 2017, and the military trying to make the clearance operations, and at that time, I think the majority of the people, including some leaders of the civil society organization, supported military. It is quite. I was really shocked how the civil society is fragile in the country. But most of the time they are democratic. But after ASA attacks, I think they don't even know the distinction between the terrorist actions and the resistance actions, because of the terrorists focus only on the non-combatants or something like that. They attack on the police outposts, but I don't want to make some issues on that. But I was shocked by that some of the leaders of the civil society supported the military clearance operation. So as long as it is concerned with the Rohingya issues, I think there are quite a handful of civil society organizations that support the international approach. If you see, there are some demand for the fact-finding mission to come into the country, and only, including YSPS, there are only around 10 organizations in the country. So it is at all only 10 organizations dare to demand such kind of request for the fact-finding mission. There are some organizations that have sympathies over the Rohingya issues, but the majority of the people, they don't want to be under pressure of the majority of the people, I think.
Derek, do you have anything to add on this, the role of civil society?
Well, I mean, I think it's relevant for Myat too to answer, as I say. But I'll just say very briefly, it's just watching him right here. that's a change right here, is to have Myat's voice speaking freely on a sensitive issue. The principle, very brave, first of all, for him to be saying that in the Myanmar environment. But just, anyway, I think it's very important for civil society's voice, and the fact that he can speak freely and bravely is also quite a step forward.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Song In Ji, she represent, maybe she, I don't know, I couldn't tell the gender by name, representing the Korean media, the Yonhap News. It's a question about the social media. We all know that, we now enter what we call the post-truth journalism, right? Very unfortunate. And she asked that, that Facebook plan to intensify monitoring hate speech, but that policy might have a negative impact on the upcoming Burmese election. What kind of influence, probably negatively as well as positively influence, that the social media channel like Facebook can have on the election? That's a question, yeah. The role of social media. Myat, would you like to, again?
Yeah, country like Myanmar, social media play a very important role, even in elections. So as I mentioned earlier, we found out that a lot of disinformation, misinformation, hate speech happen now, and all of these are intended for the election influencing. So especially Facebook in the country. And there are some challenges because Facebook cannot monitor everything on the social media or what's happening in the country. And also the current government and their supporters, the huge amount of people supports NLD, and sometimes, so disinformation and misinformation are mainly from the opposition side, but at the same time, if there is any sound criticism over the government policies, there are a lot of reports and something like that. So civil society, the social media is very important for the free speech, and but at the same time, it has negative impacts on the democratic transition. Yeah.
We know that in almost everywhere nowadays you have the so-called media tribalism. People simply hang around with people who have shared the same view, and oftentimes reinforce their prejudice and a very biased opinion. So this is a challenge, that all democracies have to confront with. Obviously, I guess eventually, I think to allow more multiple channel of communication, and also to try to build up a more inclusive arena for public discourse. And I know it's not difficult to do, but I think but on the other hand, I don't think democracy can be healthy without that. Yeah. The last question from another audience is, I think this is probably quite a simple question. That he mentioned that one of the democratic friendly institutional way of paying attention to the upcoming election is an absentee ballot. But I was told that there won't be an absentee ballot in this election. What's your opinion on that? Yeah. Again, Matthew, would you like to take up the heavy lifting first?
Yeah. Oh, I think the voter turnout will be quite low, and there will be absentee votes because simply because of COVID-19. So, and there are some frustrations over the NLD government performance, and there are some no vote campaign previously. But I think it has less effect than the COVID-19 on the voter turnout. I think COVID-19 has more effects on the voter turnouts, I think, yeah.
Okay. Now we are actually approaching, the end of our webinar, and time fly. But before we, close off, I do want to invite both of you to offer a quick final remark. Specifically, are you remain optimistic and hopeful for the future of Myanmar democracy? So Derek, would you like to go first? Yeah.
Sure, I suppose so. I'm always, you can't be in this business of international affairs and not be hopeful. I'm worried about American democracy right now, but I have to be somewhat optimistic that we will overcome our challenges. And I do believe in Myanmar that they have profound challenges, but a real commitment to see this through and to make the changes necessary. But the challenges they're facing are profound. They've always been profound. They're challenges of economic development, of political development, of peace, of unity, of trust. Almost every component of an integrated country is challenged. And that is encapsulated in this election as well. The same kind of trust and unity and capacity and all the rest is at stake in this election. It is, all of this is buffeted by a pandemic that makes us all more insecure, makes us all less prosperous, makes us all a little bit less united and more divided as a society. And the credibility of our processes are at stake. I mean, we talked about China a moment ago, and I would make it bigger than China, though China is a very important component of this. But we are now in a moment where countries and individuals and dictators are promoting alternative models for governance, or as a challenge for governance. And you have demagogues saying, you have to do it this way. You can't rely on democracy. That's we have challenges. You just need a strong hand at the top and I'll solve your problems for you. Forget about this messy thing over here. And it's a very dangerous moment where people feel so insecure or uncertain that more and more countries are succumbing to that. Or more dictators or authoritarians are taking advantage of the moment and seizing that power. So this competition of norms and competition of values that is represented in Myanmar, represented everywhere around the world right now, is one of the defining challenges of our time. So that question about how does the United States view Myanmar, or what's at stake in this election, the stake is this competition of what will people around the world decide to invest in. And there's no doubt in my mind from history and from experience that democracy delivers the goods, though as messy as it is, as difficult as it is, as clear that in the near term things can regress in some fashion, that ultimately everything that people care about, health results or education or human dignity, just basic desire, stability of societies, you can't do it without having transparent, accountable, inclusive, representative governance. So it's a lot at stake in what happens in Myanmar. Myanmar, I think we're a small country in a little corner of Asia, but that's why I was always passionate about it. I've been passionate about it for decades, but it's why it matters. And I think it's why it matters to many people around the world that Myanmar stay on track and continue moving forward.
Wonderful. Myat too, your closing remark? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Derek said. And I think I think we have to celebrate NLD for making the smooth transition, and also for the continuity of the elections and something like that. So we have to thank for that. And also there are, as I said before, we have to do more on the social harmony in terms of the social harmony with the ethnic minorities and also religious minorities. And we should show good words to the ethnic minority groups and share the political spaces with them. And at the same time, and I would like to pick up to the second last question about the social media, and as Professor Yul mentioned earlier, and as Professor Suk-Jun Lee talked about in one of our workshops, it is about the echo chambers and the polarization in the societies. Because of the social media, I think now people are like-minded people talk to each other. So they don't listen to other voices and opinions. So it is not good for the deliberative democracy or something like that in the future. So I think we also need to handle these kind of situations, and also we need to build the social harmony across the country in terms of the ethnicity, in terms of the religious. Yeah.
Okay. I would like to, speaking on behalf of EAI, to thank you, two of you, to share with us, your insight and your wisdom and your long time, the experience, with Myanmar democratization. It has been wonderful, the lively, illuminating 90-minute session. Okay, so but the time is up. So thank you for being with us. And now all three of us will sign off. But the online audience will stay on for a few more minutes. They are asked to fill out a survey, a kind of customer satisfaction report. Okay, I hope they are satisfied, and I'm sure they are, very satisfied. Okay, so I will close off this webinar officially, and it's such a wonderful, to share the panel with two of you, and it's such a such a lively session. Thank you. Bye bye. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye bye. Bye bye.